Parker Schnabel, the young mastermind behind Gold Rush, once known for his astonishing ability to extract millions from the frozen earth, is no longer steering excavators. Instead, he's behind locked doors. In a shocking twist that stunned the mining world, Parker has been sentenced to life imprisonment in one of the most controversial environmental cases in recent history. No parole, no appeals. This is the same Parker who took a college fund and turned it into a gold empire, who mined over $13 million worth of gold by the age of 24, and who turned mud into television gold, raking in a staggering $24 million during season 14 alone. But now, his $16 million from this year is frozen in time. His Dominion Creek claims are under heavy investigation, and fans everywhere are left with a haunting question. How did the most disciplined, hardest-working miner in TV history go from a legend to a criminal behind bars? Parker Schnabel has always thrived under pressure. He's been in the gold game since his teenage years. By 24, he had already pulled over $13 million from the earth, proving that he wasn't just lucky, he was a force to be reckoned with. Season 14 alone, his crew brought in a jaw-dropping $24 million. Gold prices higher than ever in season 15, Parker should be sitting on top of the world. But instead, he's teetering on the edge of financial ruin, personal collapse, and now, something far more sinister. Because somewhere between chasing ounces and chasing his legacy, Parker made one fateful decision that would ultimately change everything. That's when the story takes a dark turn, heading straight for the courtroom. As the new season loomed, Parker had one goal: 10,000 ounces. Current gold prices, that would amount to over $26 million. A monumental target, but he knew the gold wasn't just going to come to him. To hit that mark, he needed not just hard work, but massive scale, enormous risk, and no room for failure. And that's when he made the move that would spark controversy, and soon, disaster. Dropped $2.5 million to secure two massive claims, Gold Run and Sulphur Creek. These weren't just any pieces of land. They were historic sites. Rich, treasure-filled grounds, some of the wealthiest in the Klondike, where $1.5 billion in gold had been pulled out over the last century. These lands came with risks. Stripped earth, unstable ground, unknown liabilities. Yet Parker didn't hesitate. He was driven by one thing: greatness. He was willing to stake everything on this gamble. But to make these claims work, he needed to move his prized wash plant, Bob, from Ken and Stewart's claim to Sulphur Creek. It was a move that would push his team to the brink. A 25-mile haul, the longest he had ever attempted. And Parker gave them just 10 hours to get it done. Tight, insane, absolutely. But for Parker, it was just another day at the office. But against all odds, they pulled it off, just barely. Mechanics scrambled to fix broken parts, Tyson Lee pushed the logistics to their limits, and after a nerve-wracking race against time, Bob was back in action. For a fleeting moment, everything seemed to fall into place. In just 4 days, Bob pulled in 290.05 ounces, worth $766,000. Add another 276.01 ounces from Roxanne at Elbow Cut, and Parker's team crossed the 6,000-ounce mark, raking in a staggering $16 million. For a brief moment, it looked like the gamble was paying off. But behind the shining success, the clock was ticking. The deeper they dug at Dominion Creek and Bridgecut, the more problems surfaced. Red, Parker's workhorse wash plant that had been a staple for over 12 seasons and had pulled in over $53 million in gold, finally gave out. The tension bars snapped, and just like that, the entire operation came to a halt. Red had been responsible for 34,300 ounces of gold over the years, but now it was gone. With only Bob and Roxanne running, Parker's margin for error evaporated. He needed everything to go right, but as the days went on, it didn't. What the cameras didn't show was the legal storm quietly brewing behind the scene. In his desperate push to expand and extract every ounce before the winter freeze, Parker made deals at lightning speed. He bought up neighboring claims through private contracts that bypassed crucial environmental review processes. But as soon as his team broke ground at Sulphur Creek, trouble started to follow. Questions surfaced about permit, about disturbing a protected waterway, about old fuel tanks buried deep in the earth. These weren't just technicalities, they were red flags, and they were only the beginning. You probably didn't notice the subtle signs, the delayed inspections, the quiet visit from government officials, but they were there, lurking. And as Parker ramped up operations, running his team 24/7, hauling thousands of yards of gravel through protected areas, those subtle signs grew louder. The red flags turned into subpoenas. And then came the bombshell no one saw coming. Federal charges were filed, accusing Parker of willful environmental violation. And these weren't just minor infractions. We're talking illegal dredging, disturbing federally protected streams, and negligence in waste disposal, all linked back to that fateful $2.5 million land deal. That wasn't the end. As prosecutors dug deeper, they uncovered more. Missing documentation, permit overrides, and worst of all, falsified inspection reports, allegedly signed by subcontractors under Parker's direction. Suddenly, Gold Rush wasn't about the gold anymore. It was about the evidence. Prosecutors claimed that Parker knowingly pushed his operation beyond legal limits in pursuit of his 10,000-ounce goal. Argued he cut corners, ignored warnings, and put both the environment and public safety at risk. In court, the numbers were damning. 68 documented violations. More than $3.1 million in unauthorized site alterations. Contaminated soil surrounding equipment zones. Over 8,000 gallons of hydraulic fluid mysteriously unaccounted for. As the evidence stacked up, Parker's defense team scrambled to hit the emergency brake. They argued it was all a misunderstanding. Subcontractors had dropped the ball. Missing permits. Just paperwork delays. There was no intent to break the law, they claimed. But when emails were pulled up in court, the story started to unravel. One particular thread from earlier in the season made everything more complicated. It showed Parker pushing for non-stop production, explicitly telling his team to ignore any interference from the agency. That message, it didn't just raise eyebrows. It kept resurfacing throughout the trial, and with each mention, the courtroom grew more tense. Then, the case took a sharp turn. A former crew member, who had walked off the job mid-season, stepped forward with explosive claims. He said Parker knew exactly what he was doing. He had been warned multiple times about the incomplete paperwork and the looming violations, but he pushed forward anyway. Suddenly, the debate wasn't about who was responsible, it was about whether Parker had knowingly crossed the line. What followed was a harsh spotlight on a leader under immense pressure, willing to do anything to hit his 10,000-ounce target. Charges, they piled up like pay dirt. Environmental misconduct, site damage, falsified inspection reports, reckless excavation on federal land. Wasn't a single mistake. It was a pattern, a deliberate disregard for regulations. And then, when obstruction charges were added to the mix, things escalated from serious to career-ending. The court didn't hold back. It ruled that Parker's actions had caused the highest level of environmental damage, triggering sentencing guidelines that left everyone watching stunned. But here's the twist. While the headlines screamed, "scandal," the sentence itself didn't tell the full story. No one dared to say the word "prison" out loud. There was no dramatic mugshot. No televised walk of shame. Instead, Parker slipped away from the spotlight. Quietly, discreetly, rumors swirled. Some said he was negotiating restitution. Others whispered that he was in protective custody. But the truth, no one had answers. And that silence spoke louder than anything. This was Parker Schnabel, the golden boy of Gold Rush, the kid who had mined gold since his teenage years. Same Parker who had pulled in more than $13 million by the time he was 24, who led 8 spin-offs including Gold Rush, Parker's Trail, and who had hauled in $24 million during season 14. Now, nothing, not a word. The odd part, Parker wasn't the flashy type. He never lived the celebrity lifestyle. He didn't own mansions or drive fancy cars. In fact, at the height of his fame, he admitted to sleeping on a friend's couch in LA. He didn't waste his earnings on status symbols. Instead, he spent it on experiences. Trips with his dad, hunting weekends with his crew, World Series tickets, and Vegas getaways. It was never about the money. For Parker, it was always about loyalty. About building memories, not wealth. That mindset wasn't just a product of ambition. It came from his roots. Parker's great-grandfather carved out a life from the unforgiving Alaskan wilderness, a feat only the toughest could achieve. 1937, his grandmother joined him, becoming part of the legacy. Parker's dad still wakes up at 4:30 every morning to work. Parker grew up surrounded by people who didn't stop, who powered through pain, who never backed down no matter how brutal the conditions. That work ethic, that relentless drive, is what shaped him, and it's exactly what made his downfall so heartbreaking to watch. He spent entire summers working beside his grandfather, sharing dinners and listening to stories that spanned generations. That memory, the one he says he wishes he could have recorded, was worth more to him than any gold bar. Because Parker always understood one thing: money fades. Legacy is what matters. And now, that legacy is on the line. Season 15 was supposed to be his comeback, his breakout year. The year where Parker hit 10,000 ounces and left the competition in the dust. Instead, it's become the season people are calling cursed. Equipment breakdowns, permit nightmares, back-to-back legal threats. It all came crashing down. The odds were stacked against him. And while Parker did everything he could to stay focused, working harder, faster, and smarter than ever, it wasn't enough. The pressure built up, and something snapped. What comes next? No one knows. The $16 million he earned this season is locked up in legal reviews. His claims, on hold. The crew, they've scattered. Some are staying silent. Others are scrambling to hold things together. But without Parker at the helm, everything feels different. Dominion Creek was the biggest bet Parker ever placed. He didn't lease the land like before. This time, he bought it outright. No monthly fees, no royalty payouts. But with that move came massive risk. That check he signed, $15 million up front. One payment, no refunds. And that was just to get started. Because the gold at Dominion wasn't sitting on the surface, waiting to be scooped up. It was buried over 40 feet deep. Getting to it would cost millions more in equipment, fuel, labor, and time. On paper, it looked like a stroke of genius. Dominion held an estimated 80,000 ounces of gold that could be worth millions. But now, that gamble is hanging in the balance. At current market prices, roughly $2,000 per ounce, that's $160 million sitting in the dirt. Parker didn't just see it as a mine, he saw it as his future. If he could pull 10,000 ounces a year over 6 seasons, he'd hit the jackpot. That was the blueprint, that was the dream, but there was a catch. He had just 6 years left on the water licenses and permits. And after that, no guarantees. If regulators didn't renew the license, everything left in the ground would be a total loss. So Parker did what Parker always does. He went all in. His crew began moving dirt by the millions. 25 million bank yards over the life of the claim. That breaks down to over 4 million yards per season. And when you move that material, it expands, turning it into something close to 30 million yards. The kind of workload that isn't just exhausting, it's crushing. Equipment breaks down, crews wear down, schedules slip, and the pressure, it doesn't just fall on one person. It's a team effort. Tyson Lee, Mitch Blaschke, the entire crew, everyone was under the gun every single week. Because this wasn't a lease, there were no safety nets. Every delay burned money. Every ounce they didn't recover was a dollar Parker wouldn't get back. And for Parker, failure was never an option. Not after that $15 million check. Not with that ticking clock. Not when the entire operation hinged on him staying ahead of the pace. 10,000 ounces a year. No exceptions. Now, let's rewind. Parker didn't get here by playing it safe. From the moment he first stepped into the spotlight back in 2010 on Gold Rush, Alaska, he proved he was cut from a different cloth. While other miners splurged on trucks and toys, Parker kept his focus on the ground, on strategy, and on his crew. By 24, he had pulled in $13 million in gold. By season 14, that figure jumped to $24 million. The cameras followed him every step of the way, from the Klondike to Oregon, Colorado, and even Guyana. He was a workhorse, a planner, and most of all, a fighter. But in season 15, something shifted. Dominion was a game changer. But so was the pressure. Parker admitted that the real fear wasn't the cost, it was losing his crew, downsizing, stripping everything down to the bone. And that fear, it was becoming a reality. Cutting people who had been with him from the start, that wasn't an option. Parker would rather lose money than lose them. And that's exactly why he chose to grow big. Not shrink, not pivot, not bail. He bought more land. He expanded operations. He even locked in a royalty deal with Metallic Minerals, securing exclusive rights to mine a 12-kilometer stretch of Australia Creek. The deal came with a $1 million minimum annual commitment, plus royalty payments on every ounce pulled. So not only did he have Dominion to manage, but now he also had a whole secondary site under Little Flake Mining's umbrella. That's how fast things grew. And that's what made crew dynamics so critical. Parker said it himself. He didn't want people around him who couldn't handle pressure. If you couldn't keep up, you were out. No excuses, no second chances. With a $200 million long-term potential at stake, the bar was set higher than ever. But the bigger the operation became, the less room there was for error. Every broken wash plant, every weather delay, every ounce short of quota, it all piled up. And that's when the tension started seeping into relationships. Parker didn't see much of Rick Ness that season. The two barely crossed paths. In fact, Parker only saw Rick twice during the summer. They had one major sit-down on camera to discuss a tough situation Rick was dealing with, but beyond that, they ran in separate lanes. The same could be said for Tony Beats. Years ago, Parker and Tony went toe-to-toe over everything: permits, ground, royalties. But this time, they kept their distance. A few friendly cups of coffee between scenes, but that was it. Because Parker didn't owe Tony anything anymore. He owned his ground. He held his permits. He wasn't cutting royalty checks. And that meant fewer fights, but also less connection. And that disconnection came at a cost. When the stress of Dominion started mounting, Parker didn't have much outside support. He was locked in, head down, fighting to keep up. At the same time, he was still pushing forward with his public commitments. He wrapped a major deal with Metallic. He continued work on a 400-hole drill program. He even earned the Robert E. Leckie Award in 2022 from the Yukon government for environmental stewardship, just 2 years before his operations came under legal fire. That's how fast things can shift in the mining world. One season, you're winning awards. The next, you're under investigation. Off the clock, Parker kept it low-key. No mansions or jets. He stayed on couches, 1 week in another in Mexico, or sometimes the Bahamas. He kiteboards, snowmobiles, and rides snow bikes when they don't break down. Wasn't flashy. He was driven to push, maybe too much. While others wondered how a 20-something hauled in $13 million by 24, Parker was reinvesting it, risking it. By 2024, estimates put him at $10 million, far less than expected from a Discovery Channel star. He didn't live extravagantly, no rare cars or fancy watches. His home, a modest 2,000-square-foot cabin in Haines, Alaska, by a quiet lake. He even denied buying a $950,000 mansion, calling himself homeless and preferring couches. This was the guy who used his college fund to bet on mining. The $17 million Dominion Creek bet wasn't his first. It was just the biggest and most public. The ground, deep, 40 feet below frozen soil. To make it work, he'd need to move 30 million yards of dirt over 6 years to 5 million yards a year, non-stop. Dominion wasn't a small mine. It was a monster, and Parker was the one pushing to tame it, even as gold prices soared. Leveraged everything and hired a bigger crew. Parker added more equipment and signed royalty deals with Metallic Minerals to mine Australia Creek, committing to a $1 million annual work pledge. He wasn't just mining gold, he was building an empire. And the work didn't stop at the Yukon. He went global: Guyana, Papua New Guinea, Alaska, Australia, Brazil. From the Klondike to jungles, glaciers to rainforests, Parker was everywhere. While others took winter breaks, he filmed Parker's Trail, digging for gold where few dared. Braving altitude sickness in the Andes, battling bugs, mudslides, and language barriers, he kept going, pushing through it all with cameras rolling. With multiple shows, sponsorships, and streaming deals, Parker earned big. Some reports claim he makes over $4 million annually when you factor in mining profits and TV earnings. His crew, anywhere from $10,000 to $25,000 per episode. But here's the twist: despite all the millions, Parker wasn't chasing money. He was chasing legacy. He wanted to live up to his grandfather's standards, protect his crew, and prove someone from a small Alaskan town could take on the brutal mining world and win. That's what makes this fall from grace hit harder than expected. It wasn't about fame, it was about proving a point. This is Parker Schnabel, the kid who grew up in mud, the man who built an empire with a backhoe and a loyal crew. See it all put on pause, even temporarily, shakes everyone: fans, investors, miners. His $16 million haul, frozen. His Dominion claims, under legal review. His royalty sites, silent. His future, uncertain. And while Discovery keeps airing season 15, the elephant in the room is clear. No one's saying it, but everyone feels it. So, does Parker come back stronger than ever? Or does this chapter mark the end of his golden run?